Now we welcome in our good friend Gary Myers, best-selling author, formerly of the Daily News. And Gary, before we start this, I want you to know I love you dearly. Okay, so let's get that out of the way.
What's coming next, Mike?
All right, so you tweet out that if you knew that Terrell Owens wasn't going to show up, you wouldn't have voted for him. Why does that matter? Does that matter what type of player he is? Isn't that what you're voting on him?
What kind of person, not player?
Well, no. You're voting on the type of player he is to get him into the Hall of Fame. What does it matter if he wouldn't have shown up? You're not a member of the Chamber of Commerce of Canton?
I just think he showed a total disrespect for the Hall of Fame and the people that work there and, the 300 or so other people that have already been inducted. And it was really consistent with not only his behavior after he didn't make it his first 2 years, but it kind of validated to a certain extent the conversation that went on in that room for 3 years before he was voted in on the third try in February, that he just was a very selfish person and player and only cared about himself, that he was a cancer in the locker room, which had a direct effect on how his team did on the field. Now, listen, I probably would have still voted for him. I just said that because it was my initial reaction after the Hall of Fame had sent out a press release. But I do think there's so many guys that would do anything to get in the Hall of Fame who are worthy of being in the Hall of Fame, Kevin Mawai being one of them, that to put a guy in who becomes the first one ever to decline the invitation to attend the induction ceremony, my feeling is the hell with him. Who needs him in the Hall of Fame?
But whether or not he goes or not does not make him a Hall of Famer. Isn't there a part of you, Gary, that loves the spite? You guys don't vote me in the first 2 years? Here's a giant middle finger to all of you. I'm not going. Isn't that, don't you have, doesn't that give you some kind of, respect for the guy?
Who is he hurting, Mike?
I agree. He's hurting himself because he could actually give a scorched earth speech if he went there, and he's taking away a forever moment. But maybe he feels better about because the fact that you guys didn't vote him in the first 2 times.
Well, where is it written?
It's not written anywhere.
No. Let me finish this. Where is it written that Terrell Owens was worthy of getting in the first time or the second time, and that because he didn't, he sticks his middle finger at the Hall of Fame? And Harry Carson didn't get into, I think it was the 13th time. And I would take Harry Carson as my middle linebacker 10 times over again before I'd want Terrell Owens as a wide receiver in my team.
When you guys stiffed Harry Carson all those years, I don't know if you were always on the committee then.
Well, I was on the committee
Didn't he say, I want my name off the ballot, and they didn't listen to him?
Well, yeah, because they said there was nothing in their bylaws. Harry wanted his name off the ballot because he felt every time he didn't get in, and believe me, I have no idea why it took that long. And I'd like to think if I was on the committee, it wouldn't have taken that long. Not that I had that kind of great influence, but Harry wrote a letter to the Hall of Fame asking that his name would be withdrawn because it was too hurtful to his family every year when he didn't get in. But once he was voted in, he never, ever said anything publicly about, you know what, I'm going to get even now and not show up. In fact, he gave one of the greatest Hall of Fame acceptance speeches I've ever heard, because he talked about that the league needed to take care of the players from previous generations because too many of them were dying young without the proper health care. And that was the first time anybody had really spoken out like that. So Harry used it, his forum at the Hall of Fame, to enact really, really necessary and important change. T.O. is just, he's bringing attention to himself one more time. It's what he did his entire career. Every team that he played on couldn't wait to get rid of him. I'm tired of people just talking, and I voted for him. But I'm tired of people just throwing the numbers up there saying, how can he not get in? Because look at these numbers. Yeah, but what did his teams ever do? And what did he do to his quarterbacks? He destroyed every one of his quarterbacks, either when he was on the team or when he left.
No, we did to Jeff Garcia.
Yeah, listen, the most glaring case was, if you guys remember, when Tony Romo went to Cabo, right, before they played the Giants in the 2007 playoffs.
Right.
He went with Jason Witten and Rob Carpenter and their wives and girlfriends, whatever. And so the Giants beat the Cowboys the next week in the divisional round, and T.O. was crying after the game how people were being unfair to his quarterback by blaming him for going to Cabo and not having the proper focus on a playoff game. And he's literally standing there in the interview room with tears rolling down his face. 8 months later, he went to Jason Garrett, who was then the offensive coordinator, to complain about Romo only throwing the ball to Jason Witten. I mean, so this guy, he's a phony. He was a great player, and he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, and I voted for him. But he was not, in my opinion, he was not a first ballot Hall of Famer because we were told, okay, you can't consider if a guy was arrested, and he never was, but you can consider what happened in the locker room because it was an extension of the field, and he destroyed the locker room of every team he ever played with.